Morning, all. Jim and Tech, are we good to go? Do we have anybody on Zoom? We hope. And let me remind that this is a good opportunity to silence your phones. And before we start, let me call your attention to the beautiful flowers. Catherine Brooks, yet again, has outdone herself, and they're very, very nice. And for a change, I know what they are. They're hellebores. Okay. Let me ring the bowl to bring us all to a common place. I found some words in the back of the hymnal that seem appropriate. Let us open our minds and hearts to the place of quiet, to the silent prayer for the healing of pain and the soft, gentle coming of love.
This is Song of India by Nikolai Rimsky-Korsakov.
Thank you, Michael. Good morning, friends, members, visitors, both here and on Zoom. Our mission is to inspire, inform, and support all who seek spiritual and personal growth and a more equal and just community. I'm Jan Sprinkle, worship leader today, joining one of our favorite guests, the Reverend Greg Shute, for a service of history and some pretty interesting overlapping influences. Greg's the minister emeritus from the UU Church of Dover, has been a consulting member or a consulting minister for us for several years. I do have a few announcements. First, there will be a social justice Sunday lunch after service today. Our guest is Nick Garcia, professor at Washington College. Our collections will go to Shore Rivers during the month of April. Join us today to discuss ways that Nick recommends helping the earth in our everyday lives. And a second heads up, next Friday is pizza trivia night, but today is the last chance to get a ticket. The Brownings are sponsoring it as a part of the auction program. It will be here, pizza and trivia. See Jane Hardy, who's there, for a ticket yet this afternoon or this evening, today, right after the service. Final announcement. This was in the highlights in our newsletter. I know it seems so far away, but it's time to put on your thinking caps and come up with a topic that you would like to lead a discussion on during this summer session. That runs from June 2nd to September 1st. For those new to UUCR, these are informal discussions, all led by members and friends of the congregation, are not the typical Sunday service format. If you have any suggestions, please contact Annie Levin or Nancy Holland. Please sign up on the sheet that's provided on the whiteboard in the lobby. Gives us reasons to come through the summer and have some good company and some good discussions. At this point, let's light our chalice. Greg Shute will come and read the words that are now in your order of service, and I will light the flame.
We light this chalice as a symbol of the light within all creation. We light this chalice for truth. May the search for truth be within us always. We light this chalice for love. May the love for others be strong in our hearts.
And on that note, we'll sing our first hymn, number 44 in the gray hymnal. Michael, it might be a good idea to go through the whole thing. Our opening words are a responsive reading in the back of our gray hymnal, number 611. I'll read the regular type and your response will be in the italics. I am the self that dwells in the heart of every mortal creature. I am the beginning, the lifespan, and the end of all. I am death that snatches all. I also am the source of all that shall be born. I am the beginning, the middle, and the end in creation. I am the knowledge of things spiritual. I am the divine seed of all lives. In this world, nothing animate or inanimate exists without me. I am the knowledge of the knower. There is no limit to my divine manifestations. At this point, this is the time that we set aside in the congregation for the sharing of joys, concerns, or other issues. For those here in the sanctuary, simply come forward. I'll have a microphone for you to speak, and I will light a candle for you. For those of you on Zoom, wave, get Jim's attention, and unmute yourself, and Tech will let you in. But let me light the first candle, recognizing all the challenges throughout the world, both human and natural, and we have more than our fair share.
Good morning. I'm lighting this candle, or Jan will light it for me, for Joy Kim, a fellow board member, a member here. She had some surgery. She's recovering, but let's all just send positive energy her way as the recovery is taking a little longer than she hoped.
Hello, my name is Joe Weinstein, and I light this candle for the joy that March 15th, which happens to also be my partner's birthday, we got married legally over at Bethesda UU. I don't know if anyone here is familiar with Abi Janamanchi, who's one of their ministers there, or the main minister now, I think. He was our minister at Clearwater UU back in like 2010, 2013, before he moved up here. So we're really happy, and to walk in this morning and see our name tag all made out, that was nice too. Welcome.
For these shared joys and concerns, and for those that you all continue to hold in your hearts, let's observe a few moments of silence. Blessed be. Greg will now lead us in a meditation.
Good morning. Nice to see you all this morning. Always a pleasure to come and visit. Since I'm going to talk about Hinduism today, I wanted to start out by reading the most ancient script in the Hindu tradition from the Rig Veda, which is somewhere between 1000 and 1500 BCE, one of the earliest human writings. And I invite you to sort of try to do a little time travel in your mind a little and imagine what it would have been like for these people to be contemplating their place in the universe, well pre-scientific thinking, in a deep, dark place of living closely with nature and in a place that felt very random to them, and appreciate the effort being made then, but its application even to today. Then there was no entity nor non-entity. There was no world, no sky, nor anything above it. Nothing, anywhere, involving or involved. Not water deep and dangerous. Death was not, and therefore no immortality, nor distinction between day and night. But that one breathed calmly alone with nature, her who is sustained within him. Other than him, nothing existed which since has come. Darkness there was, for this universe was enveloped with darkness and was indistinguishable from water. But that mass which was covered by the husk was at length produced by the power of contemplation. First desire was formed in his mind, and that became the original productive seed which the wise, recognizing it by the intellect in its heart, distinguished it as the bond of non-entity with entity. And thus did the luminous ray of these creative acts expand in the middle, or above, or below. That productive energy became providence, or sentient, and matter, or element. Nature, who is sustained within, was inferior, and he who sustains was above it. Who knows exactly, and who shall in this world declare whence and why this creation took place? The gods are subsequent to the production of the world. Then who can know whence it proceeded, or whence this varied world arose, or whether it upholds itself or not? He who in the highest heaven is the ruler of this universe, he knows, or maybe he does not know either. Take a moment to think about that.
We'll now pass the baskets for this morning's offering, bearing in mind that this is the support for all the good works that we do in this church. Thank you, Michael. That was lovely.
Again. Today I want to talk about two of my favorite subjects, Hinduism and Emerson. And you may not think those go together very well, but they do. Surprisingly so. When the training for the ministry and going through the UUA fellowshipping process, one of the things we had to do was to focus on a particular world religion and become sort of adept at that. And, you know, our choices are Christianity or Judaism or Buddhism or Sikhism or Taoism or whatever. And actually, having been a longtime reader of Emerson, I picked up on Hinduism and did a lot of research and took a couple of courses in Hinduism. The first thing to know about Hinduism is I know that many of you think that it's polytheistic, which means many gods, right? Well, that's not exactly true, because what it really is called kathenotheistic. And what that means is that there's one God, whatever that is, but it's manifest in many, many different ways. You've also heard the word avatar, I'm sure. And so all of those manifestations that we see pictures of sometimes, Shiva and Rama and Krishna and Ganesh, and those are not gods in and of themselves. Those are manifestations of Brahman, which is the significant ground of being behind everything. But because our minds are so limited by our experience, we can't grasp that. So Brahma becomes manifest in these many, many different forms, which makes it easier for us to access that as a more concrete kind of a reality. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Of course it does, sure. So it's not polytheistic. But the problem then is, how do you get in touch with that deeper ground of being, which is beyond the manifestations, which are there for our human convenience, kind of a thing? And so that each, you know, we have our choices of the particular deity that we might choose to follow in line with. But when I was in seminary, I had an opportunity to go to Boston College for a course in Hindu ethics. And we studied a book called The Laws of Manu, which is it's a big, lengthy book of ethics. And the priest that taught it, wonderful, wonderful character, a Jesuit priest, and he had a story to tell. And he said that when the early missionaries arrived in India and set up schools and hospitals and tried to convert the people to Christianity, and that always has sort of a mixed response. But he said the priests, they would get out into the houses and the homes of people later, and one priest went into a home and he walked in, and along the wall, the worship where they had all the icons and the incense, and they had all these statues of all these different manifestations of Brahman, and there was a pictograph, an icon, if you will, of Jesus there. And the priest said, "Well, I thought you'd become a Christian. What are you doing with all those others up there with him?" And he said, "Well, Jesus is just another manifestation, and another avatar." And this priest was saying that really informed him and his Catholicity, a very strict Catholic, but understanding that in a lot of ways, Jesus is nothing more than another manifestation of that significant difference that we can't really contemplate. And so we take on that role, or take on that image. those, as I mentioned, the Rig Vedas are somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 BCE, so over 3,000 years old. The Bhagavad Gita was written around 500 BCE, which is about the same time as Aristotle and Plato, and well, shortly before the Buddha, actually. And Buddha was Hindu, by the way, as you know. But the Bhagavad Gita is part of a larger epic called the Mahabharata, which includes a whole bunch of epic tales about the origins and the, it's sort of like the Torah is in Judaism, about the origins of the Indian civilization. And it's sort of like the Gilgamesh epics in the Mesopotamia. And so it gives a basic understanding or place for this society and this culture that's evolving at that point in India. And I know that many of you probably read it during your school days or something, but the Bhagavad Gita, I didn't really understand it until I went to seminary and got a deeper understanding of it. The story, as you may know, is that Arjuna is a warrior, and he's sitting up above a ridge line, and there's this, on the plain below him are these two vast armies. There's the army that he's in control of, and there's his cousins are the other army who are trying to usurp the throne. And so as he's standing up there in his chariot with his charioteer, and he's saying, I don't want to do this. I don't want to kill anybody. These are my relatives. These are my family. I don't want to do this. And lo and behold, we discover that his charioteer is not just a charioteer, but is Krishna, one of the manifestations. And Krishna explains to Arjuna that he doesn't really have a choice, that his duty is to do what he's supposed to do, and that he has to let go of attachment to the consequences and to let go of the idea that people are being killed, and instead just to realize that as a warrior king, this is who he is and what he has to do. It's a precursor to what I've spoken before about in Buddhism about non-attachment, letting go of the consequences of your action and instead just following through with your actions. In this case, Hinduism is specifically based very deeply on duty, though, not as in terms of choice. Well, let me digress for just a minute. In the older texts, in the beginning text in the Rig Veda, there's a manifestation when the world comes into being, as I read there. There's a manifestation of this entity called Purusha, and Purusha is a human-like figure with head, arms, torso. And that Purusha is eventually sacrificed. The head is cut off, the arms are cut off, the torso is cut off, the legs are cut off, the feet are cut off. And the head gives rise to the priestly caste. The arms give rise to the king and warrior caste. The body gives rise to the merchant class. The legs give rise to the working class, laborers. And the feet give rise to the outcasts. So there's this caste system is developed, and it's certainly very much of a power and control kind of a system. So that part of this whole idea of Hinduism being so wrapped up in duty is you belong in a certain place, and by being in that certain place, you have certain duties and obligations and responsibilities, and that's who you are. So that Arjuna, as a king warrior, his duty is to have war and be a king. Well, he doesn't want to do that. And so he argues with Krishna a little bit, and then Krishna decides to reveal himself. if you've ever read this, it really becomes a very supernatural kind of awe-inspiring description of this thing, which is totally beyond description, but eventually convinces Arjuna that, yeah, okay, so you're right. I'm supposed to do this, so I'm going to do this. So, I mean, let me just say this too, that this is what I'm talking about is classical Hinduism. I can't speak for anybody, any Hindu that's in contemporary situation, how they live. Hinduism, just like has many sects, several different diversity, just like all world religions. So don't go out and visit some of your Hindu friends and say, I understand you now, and you got to do what I don't mean it's like that, but this is the basis behind the rise of Hinduism. And when you go, and I strongly advocate this, there are a number of Hindu temples up in Newcastle County. And it's a wonderful experience to go and sit there and sort of meditate with these people. They're very welcoming. Many of them actually go to the Mill Creek Church, Unitarian Church. So that's sort of the background to Hinduism, in that there's this essence, it's called Brahma, which is in the background of everything, and then it's manifest in the many different aspects of the world, of existence. So then comes Ralph Waldo Emerson, a transcendentalist. I'm going to stand up here. A transcendentalist, philosopher that I know many of you have read, and he writes an essay called The Oversoul. And it's really a poor choice of words. But what he's talking about is the oversoul is this great beyond. In Hinduism, Brahman is the singularity, the universal unity. And Atman is all the particularities. Each of us, the trees, the flowers, the weather, is Atman. All Atman together makes Brahman. So Ralph goes out and he talks about souls and all souls coming together to being an oversoul. The supreme critic on the errors of the past and the present, and the only prophet of that which must be, is that great nature in which we rest as the earth lies in the soft arms of the atmosphere. That unity, that oversoul, within which everyone's particular being is contained and made one with all other. That common heart of which all sincere conversation is the worship, to which all right action is submission. That overpowering reality which confutes our tricks and talents and constrains everyone to pass for what we are and to speak from our character and not from our tongue, and which evermore tends to pass into our thought and hand and become wisdom and virtue and power and beauty. We live in succession, in division, in parts, in particles. Meanwhile, within us is the soul of the whole, the wise silence, the universal beauty to which every part and particle is equally related, the eternal one. And this deep power in which we exist and whose beatitude is all accessible to us is not only self-sufficing and perfect in every hour, but the act of seeing and the thing seen, the seer and the spectacle, the subject and the object are one. We see the world piece by piece as the sun, the moon, the animal, the tree, but the whole of which these are the shining parts is the soul. Another term for that is monism, singularity. It's not theism or atheism or agnosticism, but just plain monism. There is only one thing. As a colleague of mine once said, you can sum Emerson all up in one sentence. There is no other. If you think about that for a minute, if there's no other, that really makes a great demand on who we are as individuals and how we relate and how we are in the world. So he goes in an entirely different direction once he establishes or agrees with this monistic attitude that there is only one thing and we are a part of that thing, which makes us feel like we belong, which makes us feel responsible, which also gives us a unique sense of freedom, though, because if we are part of the sacred, then we too are sacred, and therefore our actions can live up to that too. So instead of advocating a moving forward with an action of duty, it's a matter of choice. Life is full of choices, and we always have this opportunity to make choices about whether we move towards that oneness, that monism, or we move away from it. And it sort of shapes who we are in the sense that what is my true relationship with other people? What's my true relationship with you, or with you, or with you, or in my true relationship with nature? And then how do I act in terms of that in my relationships with people and with the world around me? So Emerson takes it to a different place, but it's based, I believe, on the same sort of sense of awareness of this transcendental essence that's behind all things, the Brahman. And he wrote a really terrible, terrible poem called Brahman. Well, he was a terrible poet, we know that. He tries to capture it in this one short poem that I won't inflict on you, but he's trying like many of his essays, he's trying to articulate something which is ineffable, that you can't really articulate. So I've spent a number of times here in the past, I know, talking about spiritual practices and what we do to get in touch with that great beyondness. And so part of what the Hindu aspect is here is to try to help us find a method and a methodology to move towards that by being aware of this deeper, more complicated and more encompassing and more inclusive reality. So those are my thoughts on Emerson and Hinduism. I'd like to hear some of your thoughts, possible thoughts.
There's a very interesting parallel with what you talked about. Robert Oppenheimer was quite a student of Hinduism. And when the bomb exploded on the test thing, he said, "Thus spoke Krishna, the destroyer of worlds." And after that, he wanted to demonstrate to the Japanese how powerful the bomb was, but the military and the president overruled him, and they actually used it in Hiroshima. But after that, he became quite an anti-nuclear person. So it's an interesting parallel to me.
I couldn't help but notice how, for me, what you read about from the Hindu writing was much clearer and easier to follow than what Emerson, the thing you quoted from Emerson. I think whoever the translator into English of the Hindu really did a great job.
Well, I totally agree. Emerson is very difficult to read unless you understand before you read it what he's talking about. You have to understand. I read somewhere that he actually had 1/3 as many words as we now have. I mean, so he uses words like faculty, and he uses different words that we don't, that he was stuck with. And so, I mean, it was 19th century writing, and he was all up in his head, we know that. But if next time you pick up an Emerson and start to read it, just remind yourself there is no other. And then as you read them, it'll make a lot more sense, because that's exactly what he just says over and over and over and over again.
It's a great presentation by Dr. Shute. Of course, I'm a Hindu, as you can see. Yes, I was born and raised in Varanasi, India. And I went to school here at Columbia University, got a PhD in chemistry. And I've been lucky to be in this great country for a long time. It is too bad that it was named as Hinduism. It is more appropriate to call Sanatan Dharma. Sanatan means eternal Dharma. Anyway, the word Hindu came through British and Muslims called it Hindus. And it gave the impression of a single type, one type of religion, but it's not. It's a multifaceted. 7 great religions are together in India. So-called Hinduism, then Buddhism, Jainism, Zoroastrianism, Sikhism that came out of Hinduism, and Islam, and Christianity. All these religions are together in India, and they are well integrated, highly integrated. Even Muslims who started to come in India in the 6th century. So India has 1400 years of experience with Muslims. And it's almost united, integrated at one time during the reign of their own Emperor Akbar. But then it fell apart because of the Orthodox and troublemaking. British, not as much as Muslims themselves. In any case, the Sanatan Dharma, eternal religion, is what it should be because it is multifaceted. So many religions come together and live in peace. In fact, the Israeli parliament in 1948 passed a resolution to thank India that the Jewish people are the safest in India. Talking about Robert Oppenheimer, we all seen the movie recently. His problem was exactly the same as Arjuna. He's worried about the result. Worried about, I'm going to kill the whole world because if I succeed in making the bomb. Just like Arjuna is worried about, I'm going to kill my teachers, my relatives. I don't want it. Mahatma Gandhi himself was a big example. He used Bhagavad Gita, that's the only book he carried with him. I brought you a copy of that holy book. And Mahatma Gandhi used that book for 30 years. That's the only book he would use whenever he was in deep stress, as he fought with the British for 30 years. And then he will say that whenever he was very, very sad, he will open it anywhere and read a line or two. And then will go on for his work. So Oppenheimer himself translated. He was a scholar of Sanskrit. He had his own translation, and he had a copy of that on his desk, Oppenheimer. And he got finally, after reading the book so many times, he finally understood that he is not to worry about the results. He got to do what he's asked to do. He's asked to work for science. He's a scientist. So your duty is towards science. Number 2, your duty is towards your country. You are the most capable scientist to lead this group to make the bomb. That's all. Don't worry about the results. So he finally got it after his own study and scholarly, and he did what he's supposed to do. And then Truman takes over. It is my job as a president to save the world. Truman was not inspired by this book, but you can see how he was focused. Anyway, so that is the story, my folks. Oppenheimer, we have to overcome our fears. Because if we are always driven by a fear of what might happen, we will not be able to do what we want to do. That was the message that Emerson Thoreau learned after that. Recently, I see a lot of activity on YouTube with Alan Watts. Alan Watts explaining, if you went on YouTube and write Alan Watts and Bhagavad Gita, he gives you a very clear explanation of the philosophy. Do not be too afraid. Do what you have to do.
I find this fatalistic. Is it supposed to be, or is that just my impression that we don't have as much choice to change society and to bring about a better world because we are dedicated to a certain role?
Well, I think to some degree, I mean, we know that the word karma comes out of Hinduism, and this notion that what we do impacts our future. But that's what I agree with you, that I think that Emerson, that's why I think Emerson took it in a different direction and said, if we truly get an understanding or a glimpse of this Brahman, this great beyond, then that influences our choices. And so we have the opportunity to make choices between doing things or not. And I totally agree that Oppenheimer, he went down that road, saw it as duty. But we also know that in the 50s, he became very anti-nuclear. He joined with Einstein and all those other dissenting scientists. So I don't think he could totally disconnect himself. And so he still had a sense that this isn't quite right. And I think that's the point I would like to make with Emerson and Hinduism, is that Emerson says, this is a great idea, but let's take it a little further and say, instead of saying, so we're fit into a structure here, a caste system or whatever, and instead say, you know, this opens us up to all kinds of possibilities if we decide to live this way. If we embrace this singularity, this universal unity, and, you know, really have a sense of it and live towards it, so that we have become a manifestation of it and we augment it. So yeah, I agree that we don't want to get stuck with it, and we do know that the Indian continent has moved strongly away from the caste system. Gandhi was totally against it, and but there's still a lot of caste left over in that system, and people are still struggling with it. But we have class systems, maybe not caste systems. We have class systems here in the United States that are pretty strict in a lot of ways too, and we have choices to make about that. Any other comments, observations?
Are you going to read Sapolsky's new book about We Have No Free Will?
No. You spoke up the last time I was here, because I disagree. I should read it, I suppose, in order to, but okay. I don't know him personally. I admit that, you know, our lives have limitations. I mean, I can only do certain things because of who I am and where I grew up and everything, but I still have a huge amount of free will. And you're right. I mean, it goes back to Thomas Aquinas and his Summa Theologica, when he says that, you know, that human beings do not have free will, that we are confined by God to be and to do certain things in certain ways. And I mean, and that was one of the reasons that sparked the Reformation, as well as the church's practices, but this whole notion of free will or not. And I'm sorry, I believe in free will.
In similar discussions about free will in a more Christian sense and Calvinism and so on, I've just got the peace of mind thinking, even if my free will is just an illusion, I'm going to do the best with it that I can.
I've been staring at the flower arrangement that Catherine brought the whole time we've been thinking about this. And I have hellebore who are just having a party in my place that Linda Dutton gave me several years in a row. And as we were talking, I want to grow more hellebore. I want this. This is my will. I want more and more and more of this particular flower. And they're very expensive to buy, and I keep hating to bug Linda all the time. So I looked up how you could grow them from seed. And it turns out that you can't get the seed to work unless you let the flower get ugly and die. And there's just something about this particularity, and there is no other, that I have to sit around waiting for the flower to get ugly to bring new flowers. And it's a spirit of there is no other, that the beauty and the death are all woven together.
When you were talking about the poem Brahma by Emerson, and I kind of liked it, but I haven't read it in so many years. But when I was a little kid, like 14, I was introduced to that poem in my very strict Catholic school. And I remember reading it and thinking, like, what in the world are they talking about? Talking about? But there was something that I still remember. I hope it's from this poem. It speaks about he's speaking to Brahma now, when I flee, you are the wings. And I remember thinking, it just really hit me like, wow, the oneness of that, I'm running away from you, but you're the wings that are carrying me. And it just, to this day, I mean, that kind of feeds into, my beliefs. But yeah, when you mentioned the poem, I had a flashback.
And just one last thing, many of you probably seen that dancing Shiva, that arch, it's all in flames, and the Shiva is dancing. There are many arms and many legs and dancing. And she is dancing destruction as all the flames. And below the flames are all these new beings being born. And the point there is that Shiva is both the destroyer and the creator. And they both are part of the same thing. And that's a thought that we could struggle with, that might be able to give us a sense of the impossibility of understanding Brahman, because it is both things. It is destroying and creating, killing and flying at the same time. Thanks.
I hate to interrupt, but some of this discussion is shaking my atheistic firm beliefs, and I think we need to move on. Anybody interested in continuing discussion, stick around for lunch. I'm sure that Greg will be more than willing to entertain questions. Let's move on to hymn number 185. In the gray hymnal, Your Mercy, O Eternal One. This may be something new to us also, so Michael will run through it one time. words.
Oh, okay. Actually, I have it right here. This is the poem. If the red slayer thinks he slays, or if the slain think that he is slain, they know not well the subtle ways that I keep and pass and turn again. Far or forgot to me is near. Shadow and sunlight are the same. The vanished gods to me appear, and one to me are shame and fame. They reckon ill who leave me out when me they fly. I am the wings, I am the doubter and the doubt, and I am the hymn the Brahmin sings. The strong gods pine for my abode, and pine in vain the sacred seven. But thou, meek lover of the good, find me and turn your back on heaven. May we all be enlightened.
If you would read the words for the flame extinguishing.
Together, we extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again.
And after the postlude, please join us for lunch. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, tech team. Thank you, everyone who made this quite a service.